on. Hello, guys. Hi, guys. Welcome to
Hey guys.
another episode of the 10x Developer Podcast. Right. So, another Wednesday. Oh, sorry, guys. We always shoot on Monday, but yeah, this week, work we explained last week. We're doing Wednesday today. And then, yeah, something new. We're using a new framing today. So, you guys can see we are three. We have a guest. If you follow us on social media, you would have seen that we made a post on our social media talking about how we're going to have Hari Krishna come and join us today. This is a special episode. Yeah, you guys already know me. My name is Precious Ongube, and I am the community manager. I'm a community manager, and yeah, you know me. I'm here always every week. So I also believe you know Nilanja. Nilanja, you want to introduce yourself?
They know me too.
Yeah,
Hi.
you
We
know
are
you too,
covering
right?
news today. We are covering something more exciting, right?
Yeah, something more exciting. The topic says vibe coding versus spec-driven development, right? So, and then yeah, I'm going to let Harry introduce himself right now. So, Harry, you want to go on and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. By the way, thanks for Nilanjan and Precious for having me on this podcast. I've been following the
Yeah,
content and yeah, great job. So privileged to be a part of this. So I am Hari. I been writing code and building applications for over 20 years now. And I think it's been the most exciting period of time, so to speak, 2025. You know, a lot has changed, and I've been quite
It's a
yeah,
bit crazy.
severely bitten by this thing called spec-driven development, and I couldn't stop sharing my excitement with Nilanjan and Precious, and they said we should talk about it, and that's how I'm here. So yeah, I started out mostly as a typical Java dev somewhere back in 2005, and I think now I've hardly I could sort of say there's a bragging right. I don't ever write code in the last 2 3 months. I just write like context engineer or just set up stuff for the agent to write the code. So that's where I'm at now. So I'll stop there.
That brings in a very interesting point. At the beginning of the year, right? Lots of things have changed, right? I love writing code,
yeah,
right? My first interaction when we started getting AI agents and coding agents, we're going to be talking about vibe coding also. I was literally depressed because I was like, dude, I mean, I've enjoyed coding. I felt like my first fear was that the joy will be taken out of my job, right? I mean, this
yeah,
agent's gonna come in, build all the code, and I will be just sitting there directing. Like that's not fun for me. Um, Obviously, I've started to reason about this. I'm okay with coexisting. Lots of things I've learned and changed, and there are other exciting stuff we're going to be talking about. But that was my first sort of reaction. Maybe we should go through each one of you, just talk about when you start hearing this vibe coding. Maybe Harry should define that term for us. What was your sort of first gut reaction?
Yeah, that's a good question to start with. In fact, as early as end of last year, even before this term was popular, I think quite a few of us were copy pasting code blindly, right? And there were these kind of projects where I did not or could not care enough about the quality of code I was writing, but I had to solve a problem, and
Mhm.
that was the biggest, thing for me, right? So I just like not look at the code at all that's being
Mhm.
written, but wherever there's a bug, I'd say this is a problem. I need this to be fixed. I pass it on to the chatbot and then I get the solution back and I paste it back. So literally not looking at the code. I only look at the problems and try to solve them, right? Back and forth. I did not think of a term called vibe. And then eventually when it was coined around February by Andre, then it became quite a thing, right? Okay, you realize this is what is happening. But like I said, yes, like someone who's coming from, like, again, like yourself, Nilanjan, coming from a ThoughtWorks background and having that craftsmanship aspect to it, where you care about the kind of code you write and you want another human being to read it, to the point where you don't care about it. It's just a expendable piece of artifact just to solve a problem. Then, like, for me personally, it has been about switching hats from, like, implementer to being that person who demands the solution,
Mhm.
right? And there is a certain switch, but nevertheless, yeah, for me the definition of vibe coding is don't look at the code. Just if there's a problem, just look at the behavior, treat the code as a black box, and just keep passing the feedback back into the coding
In
agent.
certain level,
right,
is very powerful though, right? Because we've been taught that, I mean, back in days, coding used to be like inventory, right? Having big inventory, managing large code base is a pain, costly. What businesses really care about is an outcome. If vibe coding, quote unquote, I know there are some challenges out there, obviously, gives you that outcome. In a sense, you're absolutely right. I mean, maybe I should not. I mean, that was one of the first thing I had to work through. That I know I cared about signature. I remember reading Smalltalk, Ken Beck's Smalltalk book about exactly how should you organize your parameters. I used to worry about these tiny things that at large scale of things really doesn't matter, right? Is it solving your business problem? That's what businesses care about. Coding is just a means to an end, right? So, um,
Yeah.
so so the vibe coding is sort of a way to quickly get to that point, right? But as an engineer, though, right, there is always has been this. I want to set the stage here a little bit. So it's always has been this back and forth, right? So should engineers vibe code, or is vibe coding meant for non-technical folks?
So so if I'm going to come in there, I really believe that. I
Uh,
mean, going back to like 2025, right, and then everything that's happened, right. Last year there was a lot of things around prompt engineering. Everybody was telling everybody to learn how to prompt AI. And then there is this thing where you copy your code, you paste it in ChatGPT, you try to fix it you know, with AI. That was 2024. That was so 2024. Then in 2025, we started seeing, the Lanjan, we on this podcast, started seeing like larger context window coming in. This model started becoming better. And then vibe coding sort of like became a thing. I can remember listening to this podcast by the Replit CEO, where he talked about, that in the future, um, all codes will be written by AI. And everybody was like, oh no, don't say that. Nobody's going to write, nobody's going to do that, right? But then this is December 2025. Looking at all the progress that we've had during the year, we can see that vibe coding is a thing, right? Someone can actually sit down. I have built a full software, a full website. I think I showed you some of the stuff that I built,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Using Lovable, I've built some of our community projects using V0. You just need to quickly give it to the AI and it builds it out, and people use it, right? We achieve our aim, right? Now,
Hmm.
it sort of stopped being software engineering. When we used to look at software as a piece of work or a piece of artwork, where you've built this piece of software, you take it around and then you tell people this. Now it looks like I can easily just spin it out, right? It's sort of like becoming what software engineering. I have an engineering background. I studied engineering in school, right? So engineering is problem solving. You just need to solve a problem. We're trying to move from point A to point B. How do we do that, right? That is what engineering is. And I've argued with friends who tell me that software engineering is not really engineering, because friends that studied things like mechanical engineering and then chemical, they will tell you that this is not real engineering. What are you guys doing? You're not even getting your hands dirty. But now it's looking like real engineering, where the focus is shifting from a piece of software or a piece of artwork to becoming problem solving. Like, we don't care what is inside, right? Like Harry just said, I don't care what it's treated like a black box. All I care about is the problem. Is it solved? Do I have this blocker that I have? Is it out of the way? Right? Now there are other things that comes into play, like speed, like there are lots of other things that come into play when we're talking about this.
So the
So
where I draw a line
engineer
here. Oh,
vibe
sorry. Go
code.
ahead. Go
So yeah, should engineers vibe code? I think it goes beyond vibe coding. We should take that question to say, should engineers
ahead. No,
solve
no.
problems?
I think Harry has a good point here, though. I think where I draw a line is that I have no issue with vibe coding. I
Yeah,
like that non-technical folks can build things. This is a superpower, right? I mean, we always enjoyed this. We thought this is our exclusive superpower, but not everybody can
yeah,
build. I think this is here to stay. It's not a hype. It's a real value. I talk to people all the time. They get tremendous value out of vibe coding. Where I draw a line
yeah.
is that when some folks extend that saying this will replace software engineers. I think that's where we have to draw a line. And I know, Harry, you have a strong point of view here. I'll give it to you. Like, how do you differentiate between like what we do versus vibe coding?
Got it. So I think first I'll begin with that point you raised, right? The roles, who should be vibe coding first of all. In fact, if you think about it, I mean, as old as I am quite at odds with the new JavaScript frameworks that keep coming. I am not the one who's like at the best at it, right? So
Mhm.
there probably I am a product kind of person, which who is not equipped well to handle the syntax or the semantics of it. I just want to use that technology to build something. So in that case, I'm as uneducated as technically as someone who's coming from a business side. So
Mhm.
to me, instead of who should be vibe coding, the point I see it is like, when do I vibe code? Like when I don't care about the longevity of the application, it is a throwaway piece, I will vibe code, because if you continue with vibe coding, you will hit that wall sometime where you cannot, there is a problem with it, right? And that's where people are looking at other alternate solutions. But if in the short term you have an idea, you want to pitch it in front of an investor, you want to give them how it looks and feels, right? If you like putting a clay model of a car in front of a person and say, can you fund this project? And that's how I look at it. So if that much, anyone should, and probably is a good idea for them to wipe code. That's number one. But does it replace software engineering? Certainly not. Because
Mhm.
if you think about anything that's built, even the most basic application that is built, it involves a database, it involves security, it involves like integrations and whatnot. And these are all highly complicated topics in terms of how you want to do these things at scale. And scale also brings a interesting angle to these
Oh,
things.
yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
while you can just have like put stick for wheels and run a prototype down a test track, that's very different from saying, hey, here's a car which I can give my family and have my kids ride in it, and I can sleep like a baby with that, right? There's a very big
Yeah.
difference between that, and that difference is
Agree.
where software engineering lives.
Yeah. I like it. I like the way you say it. I mean, it's not who does vibe coding. Everybody can do vibe coding. The question you should be asking is that the shelf life, right? I mean, is it something that you're experimenting and not sure if that's a good idea? Vibe coding is a great way to do that. Because back in days, we used to have an engineering team. That's why building startups used to have to raise so much money to just
Yep.
build MVP before finding product market fit. Now they can quickly build something out, take it to their customer, like you said, test track, right? And then maybe go after this. And what are the reasons why can't they build a scalable app using Vibe coding? Or is this a technological limit? What are the limits?
uh, if I may, I'll quickly share my screen in terms of
Sure.
just to
Yeah.
assist like how this whole thing looks. Let me share it, and hope my Miro board is visible.
Yeah.
Okay. So a typical vibe coding workflow would look like, involves three pieces, right? Like I have a human and I have a general purpose agent like Cloud Code or Codex CLI or whatever, pick your poison. And you have the primary artifact, which is the code itself you're writing. So typically how you start off with is a single line prompt, or maybe even you do a little bit more if you're disciplined about it, like how Nilanjan and I were discussing. You could use a plan mode and you know create a longer to-do list, and but yet there are assumptions basis which the general purpose agent writes that application, and then you get iteration one of the code, and then eventually you review, you give feedback what's not working. It addresses that feedback, and maybe in the process it introduces a few other issues, right? Annoyingly enough, it keeps forgetting, and it's like the most how do you say, the memory loss sort of patient, right, which you can deal with. It keeps trying to solve your immediate problem, keeps forgetting. And as you keep doing this iteration over and over again, review and feedback, maybe you luck out at some point, you're great, you're happy with it. But if the initial prompt was not specific enough, and if your problem scope is large enough, then what you're going to have is eventually you're going to have a meltdown, and that one's going to have, like, the AI is going to have a brain freeze. And there is a fundamental like blockage that's happening here. Again, there is this popular paper about something called lost in the middle, because this is generally what all LLMs deal with, which is they have a recency bias and also a bias towards what was said in the beginning. They kind of miss the whole feedback that you give in between. So when you're vibe coding, you are playing with the dangerous limits of the context length that you can have
Yeah.
safely with an LLM.
Yeah.
And in between is the space where it keeps getting lost. And and that experience becomes very frustrating. While in the beginning you are like super happy with, hey, I just put in a line, I got already an application deployed, amazing, great. But
So,
then the moment you go
so
into the second hour,
there,
third hour,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There are a couple of things I want to add to what you said. If you scroll up to your
yeah,
diagram, yeah. Now, I have done few sessions, vibe coding sessions with non-technical folks and in conferences, and I've seen how I vibe code versus non-technical. When you said about prompting, I mean, this is also something that very important. Lots of people are not really good at this. Just
hmm,
saying one line build an app is not good enough. It's not good enough for anybody. So even if you bypass that
correct.
point, sometimes I've noticed with vibe coding, I've noticed that it's easy to get to 0 to 80% very quickly. But sometimes when you're going to add one more feature, it breaks whole thing. And the the way we can navigate, because I can see the exact CSS error or HTML error or JavaScript error, I immediately get a context. It's impossible. So there is a huge leaky abstraction here that non-technical folks really, really struggle. 0 to 80% is really good. Everything is working fine. Suddenly you start to get JavaScript error and they get lost. And it doesn't matter amount of prompting you give, you are still spending hours and hours doing this. So that's another huge problem with this.
Fully agree. I think your mileage may vary in terms of how good you are at, like, prompting. But even if you did that, it's usually the evolution is where I get stuck. Personally, that's been my experience. Even that piece of code I was writing last year, I told you about, which is just copy pasting and going forward with it. 3 days, I've got the job done that would have otherwise taken 3 months. Everyone's like super impressed with me, and I'm like superstar. I'm happy about it. But then week after that, they asked me to fix a simple bug, and I have to sink my head in shame because I don't know what's going on, like, and I haven't understood the code base because it's a black box, and the LLM is unable to reason about it, and the context has become extremely large for it to
Mhm.
grasp what happened.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
fully agree with that.
yeah. Um, all right. So the vibe coding obviously has its limitations. You have any so so again, I mean, we sort of summarizing this a little bit. Obviously, it has a place, and I just want to clarify that we as an engineers, even we are builders, operators, we are pretty hands-on. We vibe code too. I mean, this is a common misconception that vibe coding is only done by non-technical folks. We vibe code too. And Harry provided a really good example. The same here. I'm a very back-end guy. I don't understand front end. I remember first version of Agent Link I built completely vibe coded the front end within a week, so that I can present to an investor. So that's a real example. That's how we started, and we validated, and that's how we started this product. So vibe coding definitely has a soft corner in my heart. Um, but then fast forward a little bit, Harry, because that's sort of the center or the main topic of our podcast in here. So obviously, AI coding agents are here to stay, right? And I know you use it day to day, and I use it day to day to build our products. So how do you sort of approach these tools, and what's your sort of workflow?
Yeah, so that's a really good question to begin with, right? Again, I'll give you an analogy, so to speak. When you and I interact, let's say like Precious and I interacting, and Precious wants me to build an application, and if he gives me just one line, it's very unlikely that I'll give him a good solution, right? I might make my assumptions, and just go forward with it, and this constant back and forth. Precious might get to a point where he feels like I just don't get him. The whole point is, yes, I don't get him because the communication and the collaboration has not happened between us. And that's the same that's happening even with an LLM, right? So when you're trying to build, asking it to build you an application, the question is, have we given it enough information in order for it to understand? So a
Yeah.
good example, which Nilanjan actually called out yesterday when we were chatting, is when behavior driven development was a thing in the past. It
Mhm.
was, mostly everyone remembers the cucumber and gherkin syntax given when you talk about BDD. but hardly ever anyone talks about how it was a mainly a tool for collaboration, for driving the discussion between business and. So drawing from that, I would say spec driven development, which I see as an antidote to vibe coding personally from my experience, is a way for you to drive that conversation between us and the coding agent. And the coding agents, like you called it out in my diagram earlier, it's a general purpose agent. It doesn't understand your context. It's a general purpose
Mhm.
agent which you need to provide purpose, which you need to provide domain context to. And spec
Mhm.
driven development is that conversation that you have in order to do this. Now, why is this necessary, and like where do we even go? Why did we even get in here? So probably I'll quickly present a timeline, at least for me, which mattered, and then maybe that gives a sense of why, like I got into this whole point. Sharing my screen again, so if that could
Okay.
be brought up. Okay, so yeah, so this whole term vibe coding got coined around February earlier this year, and Cloud Code was launched around that time, and we were all like happily coding away, right? And then this thing called GitHub Coding Agent happened, which was a eye opener for me personally, because this was one of those things where I could assign it a GitHub issue and it would go and run in the background and start
Mhm.
building things. And
Mhm.
going on and on, like as Cloud Code improved and Codex CLI happened and other things happened, with all of these coding agents, the runtime of an unattended coding agent became longer and longer. I would leave it overnight to build applications. And at that point, without a clear task list, even if I made a very, very good plan, sometimes difficulties would come in. And, like what Nilanjan called out earlier to me, compaction was an issue which I was facing often. Then, come this October, this was this interesting thing that happened, which was
So
Claude Code on the web.
just to make it clear for everybody, so you're saying I
Yeah.
use Claude Code on my local machine interacting, but what you're talking about is something different, right? There's an agent running in the cloud somewhere
Yes.
in the
That's
background.
a good clarification. Yeah, thanks for calling out the difference. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
my pattern of working is I'm parallelly working on different projects. What I do is I plan, I let it run for like few hours in the background while I focus on planning out the next piece of work and whatnot. So typically I'm working like a tech lead who has like several like people, developers who are building applications coming back to me, right? I should
I
do
see.
my job and diligently to give them instructions so that they work in the container. So with Cloud Code on the web, I could do a lot more parallel execution. And that point, the whole necessity for giving clear instructions became very, very important. My introduction to spec-driven development came with Kiro from AWS, and that was July. And I immediately fell in love with the idea, considering my experience and background in extreme programming and test-driven development and story mapping and all those things. Like generally having a user story with acceptance criteria clearly articulates what you're trying to build. But of course, Keto was and is a proprietary tool. And then came OpenSpec and GitHub Spec Kit, which took off like wildfire. And these are the tools which I kind of use right now. So what are these tools about and how do they address vibe coding mess? So maybe if I'll quickly jump in. So earlier we saw that we start with a simple prompt and keep going through that cycle, right? So in spec-driven development, at a high level, what you're trying to do is define what you're trying to build, how you want it to be built, and then you task it out in detail and then go about building it. So as you notice, the code itself never gets written until the very end. In between, you're having a bunch of conversations. So there could be many tools out there. You can pick your poison, but largely all spec-driven development tools go through this kind of a life cycle. So usually, as a human, I would propose a feature or specify a feature what I want to build, and that gets drafted into a user story format like with an acceptance criteria. So generally what LLMs love, or rather it's good to do, is to have a validation, a checkpoint after the task is done to see if it is
Hmm.
done to your satisfaction, right? So it's almost
Yep.
like building up a series of failing tests which that
Hmm.
LLM can go and mark done. So what happens is I first create that acceptance criteria. At this point I'm building the domain knowledge. So that's the what. I'm not talking about implementation. I'm just saying what needs to be built. And then once I'm happy
So
with
wait,
that plan,
one question,
sure.
just to set the context here a little bit. So I'm an enterprise software developer or for large organizations. So I might have a Jira board, right, where
Yeah,
all the tickets get assigned. So the precursor to this one Jira ticket was assigned to me, right?
yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I think let's hold that thought.
okay,
Especially so far, the tools which I've been talking about and speaking about, they're largely monorepo and they work with like, some of them work with greenfield projects and largely with solopreneurs and like,
okay.
microservice applications, so to
I
speak,
see,
right? How does
I
it
see.
fit into a team structure? That is something I'll
Yeah,
cover a little later. But if you are an
okay.
individual and you're that, person who wants to put in front of the investor an application, you want to be able to do that also, but eventually you do get the money from the investor, you want to be able to scale that out. So let's say we pick that persona, and so you're building out a feature. You say I want to build out a catalog of that displays certain products. You review the domain and you happy with those user stories and acceptance criteria. Then you go into the tech stack. You say whether it's a web application, how is it built, what's the tech stack, how do you use for the front end, what do you use for the back end, where do you want it to run, give all the details. Then you ask it to task basis that, like the schema and the tech stack, it gives you a granular list of things that it does. Then you review the task list, you see which of them can go in parallel, can you assign them to a sub agent, and so on. And eventually when you're happy with all the tasks is when you say go and execute. So there's a important point that happens here. You are not sitting on one single context window from the beginning of the process to the end. Unlike
Mm,
vibe coding, you need
mm,
the LLM to remember stuff. And if you lose it, the memory is the issue, right? Here,
yeah,
what's happening is at the end of each stage, you have an artifact which is generated, and that artifact becomes the input to the next stage, and so on. And even the task list, you don't need to do it at all at once. You can always say, go from 1 to 100, do 100 to 200 tomorrow maybe, and you don't have to worry about lost context because all of that is captured. Just like
yeah,
plan mode has a list, but
yeah,
this spec driven development obviously has a little bit more structure and finesse to it, and it gives you that feedback and conversation opportunity so that you solve all unnecessary problems and questions and clarifications before you go to the code stage. So I'll stop there. Again, I've been on
Yeah,
a
yeah. I want to clarify a
monologue.
couple of things there, Precious. Let me go
Yeah.
first. I have lots of
yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, uh, so just to clarify here, when you having this feedback loops on each what, how, task, there is always an LLM involved here, right? You're
Hmm.
chatting with LLM, right? I just wanted to make
Correct.
sure that you're not going off doing all this on your own. You're actually working with Claude or whatever tool to build this artifact.
Correct.
Um, the second thing I wanted to say is you answered it because I don't do this. I do the similar thing but in plan mode, which is completely unstructured. So this actually allows you to what people call context engineering. This what are you putting a structure in that context engineering, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
That is
okay.
correct. And this is kind of, I won't try to interpret it differently, but the recent paper that came from sort of Anthropic also about how long running agents are, how they are trying to look at it, right? They have an initializer. And then what is the issue with the long running agent? What's
Mm,
forgotten? How do you
mm,
maintain like context for that?
yeah.
Content here, you will see that it is kind of resonating with what I kind of may have explained about spec-driven
Yeah,
development.
yeah, I know, Hari, you're over-indexing on long-running agents, but I think this fundamentally is useful for even the
Short running,
short
yeah, you're
short
absolutely
running
right.
because what I've noticed is that lots of engineers are not really good at understanding how to kind of prompt the context. Because one of the things I want to say over and over again, LLMs are stateless, and when you prompt a LLM has no idea what your code is. What Harry is
Correct.
showing you here is essentially how to set that stage because context is everything. Context is a king, right? That drives the quality. And
Absolutely.
putting some structure around that is, I think, is super powerful. I really like this. Precious, you have any questions? Sorry, I stopped you
Yeah, I
there.
wanted to ask the first question, which means so from what, how, before we get to tax, everything there before that is planning, right?
Yeah, in fact, task is also planning. You got to review the task list. All you're doing at the task is to do
Okay.
list, right? And
To do
and which
list.
order it has to be done. Maybe you have a front end and back end application. You have a personal preference of saying I want to build a back end before the front end, right?
Yeah.
You have the choice, so you review that. So almost till this point, you are generating different artifacts. You're generating user stories. You're generating schema documents and a to-do list. And
All
finally,
right.
when you're happy with all of these, let it rip. At that point, you can go and say, write the code for me, because you have reviewed everything in the earnest.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. So I really like this. I'm really enjoying this conversation, right? So now I know from the conversation we had previously, you said you don't like over indexing on tools, right? But then I'm sorry, but I have to ask you about tools. I have to ask you the question about tools. So let's say I want to do this, right? I want to get this started today. So is this something I can do with ChatGPT or something I can do with Lovable? Like, I want to talk about the implementation of this particular process.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question. Is it more about, is
The
this
tool.
specific to a tool, or can I use it with any?
Yes. So let's say I want to go through this process, right? So what
Mhm.
tool do I start with?
Okay, so that's a good question. So first of all, what I've explained here is a overall concept. I think if you wanted to, you can rig your own spec-driven development, framework, so to speak. It's just like putting together a bunch of Markdown files, which become the a project initializer, right? For example, in Claude, you can say this is what you start with, like project structure, read and understand the documents fully, and just adhere to them, right? That becomes the Bible or whatever holy text that it's got to follow, right? And then you can do that. But if you wanted to pick a tool, you have a few choices. Of course, you have Kiro or GitHub SpecKit or OpenSpec. OpenSpec happens to be one of the tools that I use because it is agnostic to the coding agent itself. I could use Claude Code or Codex CLI or Quen or whatever, my choice, right? And so basically the same thing is encoded within the OpenSpecs workflow also. So maybe if it is kind of that time, like if at a conceptual level we are all okay with what we just discussed, I could do a live demo of what does it look like to do spec driven development with code, Claude Code and OpenSpec. That's what I use right now, so maybe I can show you a quick demo of that.
All
Yeah,
right.
go for
So
it. Just to
okay.
answer your question, Precious, I mean, one way you can use that with your Lovable or V0 is that it produces a document, an artifact.
Yeah.
So which is maybe marked down. I don't know what format is that. You can essentially copy that content and put it as a prompt to Lovable to generate the code.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
but sorry, I think I probably did not understand that very well earlier. But I don't think this would work with Lovable at all, because Lovable or Replit, they, again, it could be my lack of experience using them, because I just use them for initial prototyping. But I cannot generate this level of task list and give it to Lovable, because Lovable begins with just the top level prompting, and it is designed in a
Got it.
different way,
Why
maybe.
not? Is it at the end of the day, it's just a document with text, right?
Technically,
Yeah.
but it depends on how much documentation that gets generated, right?
Oh yeah. So
So
you might hit the context prompt
yeah,
limit,
the
number of
context
things you
limit,
can
and
specify.
Yeah.
that's the difficulty. And you're right, Nilanjan, it's Markdown that gets generated.
Okay.
So it depends, right? Like sometimes I ask it to generate API
Yeah.
specification files. So
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
All
Let's
so
right.
see it
maybe
in action. That'll be awesome. Yeah.
let's do a demo. So maybe that kind of
Yeah.
clears up some of these things. So instead of
For
just
sure.
talking about it.
For
Cool. So
sure.
I'm gonna pick the same life cycle with this tool called OpenSpec, and OpenSpec goes through the three stages. It's the smallest, so I picked this, so it's easy for the demo. Uh, so there's a proposal stage, and then there is an apply the change, and then the archive the change phase. So let's go through these three phases. So what I have here is an empty project, nothing going on here. I'm going to say OpenSpec init. So basically, nothing going on right now. It asks me what is the coding agent of my choice. I say I want to go with Claude Code. I select it and move forward. And then it says, hey, I've initialized your project directory with a bunch of things. So if you look at it, it has an agents.md file. I like this about OpenSpec because it uses the agents.md standard, which is equal across all coding agents. It's got a bunch of the three-stage workflow which I spoke about: the proposal, the application or implementing, and then the archival is all encoded into this markdown file. It sets the ground for how Claude should work. Then it's got a bunch of commands which it has already initialized the project with. So which is the same propose and whatnot needs to happen. So which means I have a basic shell of a project. So I can go into Claude. And when I go in there, I want to say, I'll copy this prompt which it has given me to set the initial context. So I'll just launch Claude, and then I'll say, please read the project.markdown file, which is at this point just a placeholder, and then
Mhm.
say, fill it up for me. So
Mhm.
now we're going to have a conversation with the LLM to say, what am I building? And this is the phase where we set the overall ground rules. Like, this is what we're building. You're supposed to do X, you're not supposed to do Y, and stuff like that. So it's reading through my markdown. It's just burning some tokens, of course, but in the process, it's going to ask me relevant questions as to what I want to build. So I have named this folder called Digital Artwork Gallery. So it's going to figure out what kind of application I'm trying to build, and it's going to ask me. It's just asking me a few questions, right? Is it a personal portfolio? Is it an
Mhm.
e-commerce? Is it a community gallery for multiple artists? Let me choose. It's a personal portfolio, right? I just give it that answer, and
Yeah.
then it asks me like, how do you want to build this application? React, Next.js, and Vue, and like what's the technology you want to use. I'll probably say I want to use React for front end, and Node for backend, because I don't know anything else. I'll just say that. I'll type that in. Then it asks me like what's the database stack it want to use. So I'll say, let us begin with in memory. We can switch later. So usually what I do is I use Whisper, or I talk to my LLMs a lot, but
Yeah.
in this case, I'll just skip that and I'll type it. So it's asking
Mhm.
me, what do you want to do? I'll say I'll do TypeScript, and then I want to do unit testing with Vite. I want to do prettier. I want to follow all these best practices, and end to end, I'll probably use Cypress. So no problem, sure. And all I also want to do is coding style is I want to do API design first, which means capture API signature in OpenAPI for each feature before building FE, the front end or back end. So that's just a preference, right? So I just put that in and submit. So I've given a bunch of answers just to start off with. It's good enough, sets the preamble for the
Yeah.
application. So this is the
Mhm.
initialization phase. So now we get to proposing a feature and then creating a task list and then building the application itself. So let's give it a moment and then look at what it creates in the project MD file.
Interesting.
So this is a conversation you would have, right? Because if you and I were
Yeah.
working as a
Yeah.
pair,
Yeah. Yeah.
like as an expert engineer, you would ask me like, these are all things you should worry about. You tell me what you
Yeah.
Yeah.
want, and yeah,
Right.
you just
Right.
have that
Right.
conversation,
Yeah,
and
and
it's
I
building
like
that.
the structure. I mean, I do similar things, but I'm just using the plan mode for this. But this, I like the structure.
Exactly. In fact, I kind of like the whole product management aspect to it also. I'll talk about it shortly. So it's
Mm.
kind of given me a bunch of goals, domain context, what I'm building and whatnot. Ideally, what we should do at this point is review this file in the earnest, because you want to understand what it knows and make
Correct.
corrections, right? But in the interest of time, I'll move forward. I'll assume it's done the right thing, but
Mhm.
let's go to the initial stage, which is now I'm going to propose that artwork display catalog is what I want to build. and then I say show a grid of artwork, um, and maybe begin with a few hard coded ones just to get started. This is my initial feature. That's all I want to
Yeah.
build, right? So I
Mhm.
just let it go. This is the proposal phase here. So now what it's going to do is generate a draft change proposal. So everything in OpenSpec goes through something called changes. It assigns a change ID, and that change has a proposal and a related documents, all the artifacts for that particular change. So now it's figuring that out. So under changes, you will see a new change coming up. And this is the part where you put together your user stories and acceptance criteria. So that's where
Yeah.
I said I like the product owner aspect of it, because now it's going to have that back and forth with me to say, business wise, what do you really want to build? Just saying an artwork gallery doesn't make sense, right? I have to have
Yeah.
some explanation to that stuff. So let's look at that.
So that's
So
why it's
here it's
sort of, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. It's just
No,
created
no, no,
this
no.
structure
Yeah.
here. It's going to ask me a bunch of questions. Let's wait for it.
Okay, okay. All right. So now I see when you said that this, you have used it in a context of smaller team or solo entrepreneur, because obviously we are mixing multiple roles here. In large teams, they are separate
Exactly.
person. Mm,
So, in fact, I'll talk about it towards the end. I am looking at a few customized spec-driven development tools that I'm building right
yeah,
now,
yeah,
where I maintain the what in, let's say, a Notion or a separate GitHub repository,
yeah,
and the how separated in the code base, because this is technically domain artifacts, which ideally, like what you said, should be in the Jira or something like that, right?
uh,
And the implementation details should live in the code base.
right,
I don't want to mix those two things up, but now it's kind of like monorepo right now.
yeah,
And for one way or another, Kiro does the same, GitHub SpecKit does the same, because of which I've had to sort of customize some of these tools to my liking, where I maintain the what aspect of it in other places like Notion or an
yeah,
Obsidian Vault or
yeah.
something like that.
Well, we might not have to. I mean, I feel like there is obviously lots of change happening in the industry. I mean, I know lots of
Yeah,
product managers also use Claude Code. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Now that you mentioned it, I was about to say maybe we should talk about at what size of industry or what size of company is really going to find this very useful. Is it like small teams, entrepreneurs, or how can big companies also use this? And then at what level does it bring?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question, Precious, because I think currently the most traction I'm seeing is with micro SaaS engineers and solopreneurs who are able to build this, put it out there, small teams who are able to work with it. With a larger team, I think the interesting part is you're going to have to work with their current team structure, right? They may have a QA team, they have like a specialist security team, they have bunch of uh, functions which work in a certain way, like the business hands off to product hands off to dev hands off to QA, and so on. That might have to change in itself, but there is benefit you can draw from it by working this into their structure, but it doesn't really fit in immediately, right? uh, so as is what I'm explaining right now, where does it fit? It fits perfectly well for small teams and individual engineers, but for larger teams, it has to require two things: one, minor changes in the team structure, and number two, you will have to customize the workflow for each organization, because everyone has their own character in terms of how they build those applications out. But do they get benefit? Definitely yes. That much I see, because even in large organizations, the difficulty is the AI is being used in localized context, right? So the product owner uses her own section where just auto completing a few PRDs with AI coding agents. Then there are developers she might just go and do something, build application with an AI coding agent. QA might be using a AI coding agent to do something else. But are they using holistically the AI to improve the collaboration between them? Maybe not. So that's where, like, spec-driven development could improve that workflow between them to say, how do I bring these artifacts together in one place? So that's what's happening.
So
Right.
there could
So
be argument made though. Sorry, go ahead, Precious.
okay. So before you get to the argument, I just want to ask. So
Mhm.
I mean, you demoed it here, right? And then we all saw it. So is this going to be like everybody sitting in a room and one guy with a computer and the questions asked and then we just answer?
That'd be a brilliant exercise, actually. Yeah, I kind of like that kind of approach because the lesser digital you have, because one LLM can pretty much do the job, right? Why does everyone need to have a laptop there? I actually like it because I would even put that laptop aside and have a mic and just put Whisperflow or something like that on it, and just everyone talk to the LLM and just have that exercise. That I love that idea. Yeah.
That's probably bad business, no? For most.
Right.
So we should come to, when we talk about predictions, we should talk about this. I think layoff's going to
Yeah.
be another interesting thing. But I want to put you on the spot here a little bit. So argument could be made that LLM is going to get better and better, right? There is no reason to believe this tool's not
Mm-hmm.
get smarter, right? I
Mm-hmm.
see this. I mean, I definitely see the value. I also see this as a stopgap measure of some of the problems we have with existing tool set LLM, right? So put in check, right? I don't even check my spelling when I type prompts now, right? I mean, it figures it out.
Precisely.
Punctuation is irrelevant, doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right?
We
I
just
know you
do.
talked about loss in the middle. I'm pretty sure there are hundreds of research going on around to fix that problem, different training. So down the line, I mean, we're just going to type in stuff to LLM and it will figure it out, right? I mean, do you see this being like probably getting replaced as LLM gets smarter and smarter?
That's indeed a good question. So the way I see it, right? Uh, the question in my head also is, how long do you need the spec-driven development tools? If Anthropic, for example, with their initializer and that kind of structure that they're going with, and the improvements in the plan mode, it could potentially be possible. The plan mode itself improves so well, or there are skills which are set up such that it can help you with these things. You might not need these frameworks anymore. You don't know. Like even I kind of believe that spec-driven development tools, so to speak, maybe stopgap for the moment
Yeah.
to address the situation we are in.
Mm,
But spec-driven development as a concept may live into the future.
right.
It might get absorbed into mainstream coding agents,
Mm,
but will coding agent become smarter and then you don't need it? That I don't think so,
mm,
because the coding agent still will have that amnesia. It will still have that issue of being stateless. It's not an issue, right? It's design.
mhm,
It's designed to be stateless. That's going to be
mhm,
there. But
mhm,
how you provide the context, how you design the harness around it to provide the context, that will keep changing. Will it be as an approach? Will it be as an offering which comes from a third party team or a tool company? Or maybe even like primary general purpose agent providers like Codex CLI and Claude, they themselves come up with a solution, but someone will
yeah,
have to tackle that problem. But
yeah,
nevertheless, the
agree.
whole point
Agree
about
with that.
software engineering, right? How do you encode your software engineering into your coding agent? That is still our concern. And there has to be someone
Yeah.
who has to give us that shovel to do that shoveling of software engineering. And that shovel has to be built by somebody. Is spec-driven development tool stopgap? I think so too. Maybe it is. But is spec-driven development
Yeah.
as a concept going away? Maybe not. Maybe that might just still live on to help you engineer context.
Yeah. So
I
so
like
so
that.
just a little. The last
That's
time I built something with Lovable, right? Um, I guess about a month or two ago, I noticed that they have this feature called Think, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so normally my workflow is I go to ChatGPT, I bounce my ideas, and I tell it to give me one giant prompt. I can give it to Lovable, right? Then I take
Mm-hmm.
that prompt and I give it to Lovable, and I go to the think mode, and I say think, and then it takes that idea, it breaks it down for me, and tells me, oh, I'm going to create something like this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then I can make suggestions and say, oh, okay, this, I don't want you to use this. I don't want you to use this. Before I can now run it normally and say, okay, go on and do this, build this. So the think mode takes like lesser tokens. It consumes like lesser tokens. I think like half of the tokens just to have that back and forth conversation. Then where it takes the
Yes.
bulk of the token is when I now say, okay, now go and I think it's called plan, not think.
Mm-hmm.
Plan. Yeah.
Plan, yeah,
So,
probably.
right? Yeah. So we have that conversation, right? And then I can now say right now, just execute. Then when I now go to the execution mode, that is now when it now goes on to give me the output and then all those things. So I'm just trying to like say what I agree with you when you say that spec-driven development as a concept, as an idea, it might not go away because someone has to really sit down, whether with the LLM or with your teammates, you have to sit down and go through that process. So yeah, just to say that I agree with you. Yeah.
I mean,
Correct.
I think
Yeah.
this becomes an interesting, and we covered this over and over again in our podcast too, right? I mean, what are the skills if you're hiring engineer these days, right? One of our favorite topic, hiring engineers and jobs, right? You saw that Anthropic Opus, that test, right? I mean, Opus performed better than any human candidate Anthropic interviewed ever on their take-home
Mm-hmm.
test. So that fundamentally poses questions: how even companies interviewing these days? What is it? You can't ask JavaScript questions because that's stupid. Because LLMs are really good
Yeah.
at this, right? So then becomes is that question like this, right? I mean, you want to hire an engineer who can effectively, the more effective you are driving these tools, more productive you are. I think that's the skill now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
assuming how Harry operates workflow, I'm revisiting my workflow saying, hey, his workflow is better than mine. That means he's producing much higher quality code base. I guess the error rates are very less. That means he's producing faster. I mean, I want that, right? That's what anyone wants. So driving LLM and how to do that is a skill for engineers, right? I mean, that's what we're going after here.
That's
And I
a
think, yeah, that's
that's a great
and
point.
yeah. Okay, yeah. No, what I'm trying to get to you, Precious, too, right? Then I feel like the way I look at this, LLMs are, you can build anything you want as long as you know how to verify that it's working, right?
Yeah.
It's all that. Your imagination is a limitations. You can ask LLM to build art gallery with real time this, real time this, integrated. Imagine what all things we could build. But the question is,
Yeah.
LLM can produce a blob of something. You got to understand how to verify this actually working. And what
Yeah.
Spec is allowing, his workflow I liked really is that helping you to break it down step by step and think through that. Okay, I'm going to ask LLM to do that. LLM might able to do it, but how will I know it's actually working? I
Yeah.
think that's a critical piece of context engineering these days, man. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
well, I referred that link to, yeah, we talked about yesterday. That's your software 2.0. Software one was you create a real spec. And I want to be very clear. Harry is not talking about detailed specification document and the diagram. What he's talking about is that it helping you think through the process of what you're trying to build. This is a
Yeah.
guiding tool, a mentor that walk you through the steps, right? Because the world that we are heading into is, as long as you know how to verify your software, you can build whatever you want,
You can be. Yeah.
whatever.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah. I
that's the
agree.
whoever figured that out is the winner in this space.
Yeah. 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 And then this
We
process, this workflow explains it very well. Like I'm definitely going to try this. I took some screenshots while Harry was sharing his screen, right? I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to.
it is useful because in a second, my first gut reaction was, God, this is gonna slow me down because I want to move really faster. But
Yeah.
every time when I had LLM sessions where I quickly jumped into solution, I regretted it because I spent way too much time fixing problems.
Yeah. You start debugging.
Yeah, code generation is the easiest part in this new world.
Yeah.
I'm not even. He's right. Half of the code. I mean, that's my one other problem is half of the time I don't even review the code because as long as I know I'm verifying it's working, and my plan was right. I mean, it's good. It's golden.
That's vibe
Um,
coding. You don't
and
need
I,
to
I
look at the
think
code.
Yeah, I think that's the mindset lots of engineers have to go through. I mean, a lot of us are not really there yet. I still get that question where, oh, when I'm going to move from vibe coding to real engineering, how should I do the handover? And I always struggle saying, what do you mean by that? There is a
But
handover.
real
What do you mean?
engineering
What
is
is a
problem
handover?
solving, right? There's not
Yeah.
real engineering is problem solving. So there's nothing like web coding to real engineering.
I mean, he's right. Back in days, I used to copy answers from Stack Overflow. Now LLM generates that code for me.
Yeah.
It's sort of same thing. As long
In
as
fact,
you know what you drive.
the skill you were talking about, right? How do you hire engineers and whatnot? So, the longest of time, I used to be I'm still a trainer and a coach. I teach test-driven
Mhm.
development. I teach design patterns, workshops, and stuff like that. And last year, it was an existential question, sort of like, do you still need to teach people all these things? Like, people
Yeah,
need to learn a visitor pattern? Do people need to
yeah,
learn these things? Then we realized it's not really teaching someone about visitor pattern. It's teaching the person to encode the details in a context, to say you want to prefer encapsulation over inheritance, because even if it's
yeah,
an LLM, it doesn't want to get stuck around itself, right? And if you are
yeah,
able to encode it and you understand the reasoning around it and you're able to verify it, then the code that's written by the agent is a lot better quality. But the person who's structuring that context still needs to understand in their head what is like good quality code. So even sometimes people talk about, like, reward hacking your way to get the test passing, right? Unit test,
yeah.
it just gets it passing. But if you
Right.
understood test pyramid well, you understand mutation testing. So you would
Yeah,
run mutation testing to make sure
yeah.
the tests actually have to fail when they have to, right?
Right,
So you could
right,
Yeah.
address
right.
it. So you are looking for skills where someone really deeply understands software engineering well, but probably is very very forgetful when it comes to syntax. So again, not a shameless plug for me, but I have a very bad memory when it comes to syntax. I almost don't remember any programming language very well, but I have the uncanny ability to, like, apply a concept which I learned in one programming language in the other. So with find that very
And
liberating, because with
yeah,
yeah.
and 90% of the organizations are not good at this. At testing that. They
Yeah.
still ask stupid questions like how are you gonna do this on this particular languages? I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
So that brings down to I'm gonna switch to predictions now
Yeah.
because
Predictions. Yeah.
Harry already talked about this. So
And maybe
let me
just before we jump into predictions, do I quickly show the end part of this,
yeah.
the
Okay, sure.
demo? So
Sure.
we
Sure, sure. No,
leave
no, no,
people
yeah, yeah.
with
Please,
a
please. I
completeness.
was yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you can bring the screen up. So
It's up.
it kind of finished generating a proposal. It's got like, I'm just going to skim through it. It says hard coded data, what are the risks and mitigations, the dependencies, what is the success criteria, what is the grid layout it has to show. I have to review this, and then I have to tell it, like, whether I'm happy with it or not, right? I have to add acceptance criteria to it and stuff like that. So here's a detailed task list. So if I'm not happy with it, again, I don't go and edit these files manually. That's another thing I want to call out. So even to update the specification, I use the LLM, right? So maybe I'll say, I want to first generate the OpenAPI spec before any other task. And I say that, and then it'll go update my task list, and it's going to make that, yeah, I hit the limit, and this is always going to happen. So yeah, but yeah, it never mind. Like, I'll just quickly walk you through it. So basically, it's going to change the structure of this and update these documents, and eventually I
Mhm,
can let it rip. So you
mhm,
see the granularity of the task list that it's generated, right? So
mhm.
now when I let it run, I am quite happy with the fact that it is not going to fall off a cliff somewhere, right? And like you rightly said, for each of these things, I might have a specialized sub agent also, which knows how to verify whether the task is done.
Yeah,
Done.
I was gonna say, Harry, is maybe a feedback for the project is this feels like might blow up the context because I feel like there are lots of stuff in here. What I was thinking that recently Claude sort of recommended progressive kind of opening up information. It might be, or I don't know whether you guys do it. Would it make sense to separate the task into a separate MD file? So when it gets there, it loads that content instead of loading everything at once.
That is correct. So, in fact, what OpenSpec does, you read my mind, kind of
Yeah,
the change which we're looking at is a single change. So, once this is implemented, it goes to the archive phase, which I was showing earlier. So, there it
okay,
gets compacted and then it comes into something called a source of truth specification,
okay,
which is a
okay.
lot more succinct version of it. So,
I
when I
see.
pick up for the next analysis, but ultimately, right, a to do list is not taxing on the context because a to do list is handled one at a time. It doesn't go into
Mm,
compaction. So when you let it
mm,
run, what
I
is
see.
difficult for some an
Mm,
LLM is to maintain memory of what you mentioned. But to-do list,
yeah,
you can be as forgetful as a goldfish because you just need to remember one task at a time, and you can
right,
assign a
right. That's
bunch of
true.
tasks to a sub-agent and get through with it. So I
Good
hope I
call
answered
out.
your question. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, good call out. Um, all right, we switching to predictions.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
should not call it
predictions.
predictions. Predictions. Okay. My first prediction is that this is so. In the current space, obviously, we are trying to figure out how the mechanism tools, the way we can mitigate some of the shortfalls of LLMs, right? It focus at the middle. OpenSpec is a great way to sort of address that. Context engineering is another big deal, and this is a great tool. I feel like this is not enough. I feel like
Hmm.
what type of programming language you use also makes tons of difference. Because I always sort of over-index on verification, because as long as if I LLM can verify a solution, it will know how to fix it, right? So that's why going back again, I think Harry mentioned this already. Having unit tests is a really, really good idea. Companies, organizations who had a good, solid unit test suite, they will move faster with LLM because they have this verification mechanism built in. So I will feel my prediction is going to be the statically typed programming language is going to make a huge comeback because types are a great feedback mechanism. Functional programming language is going to make a huge comeback because I have noticed LLM struggles with mutation. Lots, again, remembering variable updates here and there. If your language is like Scala, immutable, then it becomes super easy for LLM to short context. Everything happens within the function. It becomes easier and easier to LLM to produce a better code. That's my first prediction.
That's indeed a good one because if you look at something like Haskell, is probably I think is a very good language to work with when you're using a coding agent because Haskell is so well typed and so
Yeah.
well designed that it's hardly something that you can go wrong with. So yeah, I mean, if the safety is built into the language, that's great. But even if otherwise, you have tests and various types of mechanisms to verify them. But good point.
All right.
Yeah.
What's your
You remember?
prediction,
You remember
Harry?
okay. Remember when you
Okay.
mentioned something about having a programming language for LLMs? I don't know if it was in news, but I know
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
Well,
programming
I
language
mean,
just
there
for
there are some
LLMs.
people who talked about that, but again, I don't know
Yeah,
how that real going to be. I mean, you need to train LLM with some data about a
yeah,
language. If that
yeah.
language doesn't exist, how are you going to get training data?
So I guess the language is going to be an offshoot of what already exists. So it's not going to be something totally new, right? So it's going to
Yeah,
be
and
maybe
sadly
like
enough, the Haskell is a good example because it has proofs built in, right? Right. If it takes A to A, I mean, you can do is easily to verify that it cannot go beyond this. Having Having
yeah,
constraints is a good thing. When you have such a powerful model like LLM, it can do everything. Putting a constraints in there,
yeah,
I think will help. All right,
yeah.
Harry,
All
what's
right.
your
So Harry
prediction?
was a prediction.
Um, I won't call it a prediction. It's just probably an extension of what I believe is looking very likely in the beginning of next year, which is I consider it like renaissance of product engineering, like truly product engineering, right? Ideally speaking, you want to be able to think of an idea and the distance between your intent and the implementation should be reduced, right, as much
Mhm.
as possible, without sacrificing the articulation of the detail.
Mhm.
So largely the problem I see right now is you have an intent and then you are going into a meandering path of achieving it, or there are people
Yeah,
in between and there's loss in translation.
yeah,
With agents becoming smarter and agent frameworks such as initializer and these approaches like spec-driven development becoming more prevalent, you're going to be
Mm.
able to articulate much better what your intent is, and converting intent to implementation with full honesty is going to be like almost table stakes by like
Yeah.
first quarter or second quarter. And with that comes like the actual skills that one needs to learn as a product engineer and as a software engineer, which is good product engineers, good software engineers who know how to take a nebulous problem into a actual solution. It's an environment for us to thrive. So
Yes.
that's what it looks exciting to me more than anything else.
Agree.
Oh
Well,
yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
I can see that.
I agree with you. Yeah. All right.
Precious.
So for me, basically the topic of our conversation today, vibe coding, that's the first thing first, is going to go mainstream, right? 2026, almost everybody, a child, a 5-year-old in school can be able to build out a quick game that he or she is thinking, implement it and start playing it ASAP, right? Then the other thing is also that the distance from planning, coding, and deployment is going to shrink, right?
Mm.
So we're going to see AI closing the gap. I don't want to say roles like DevOps are going to become, but then probably I think they are going to get hit. They're going to be touched by AI. Deployment, especially in that deployment angle part of things, right? So we're going to see a lot of these vibe coding products or tools integrate cloud, and then deployment is going to sort of like become um, almost gone, right? Right.
Yeah.
Then the
Yeah.
other thing is debugging. AI is going to learn how to debug itself in
Mhm.
2026, right? I mean,
So you're
I'm
saying
betting on
it will
this.
create. You're saying it will create bugs and it will fix the bug itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And again, it will create. It just go
Yeah,
off and do that forever
Existential,
while we
yeah.
while we.
creating an
And
existential
I
loop
and,
for
and I
itself.
guess that is going to happen more
As a
with
job
stuff
security,
like
that's why I'm important. It's job security for AI agents. No,
job security.
no, I agree. Agree.
Yeah.
Um,
So why that's things like spec-driven development is going to help that process a lot of very well,
yeah.
because it's going to be able to know what the endpoint is, what this person is trying to build. So in the process, it's going to create bugs, find out that this is a bug, debug it even before it gets to me. So yeah, it's going to get very
I
good at
like
debugging
that.
itself.
I like that. I mean, I think
Predictive.
there
Nice.
is always a tendency to move stuff to the left, right?
Yeah,
The quicker you can find the defects, cheaper it is. So
yeah,
going back to the AI thing in school, you mentioned that at least in US, I feel like it's a huge problem, and I mean, it's not a prediction. It's that how kids are not allowed to use AI in school, right? There is an
yeah,
you should not use AI. I mean, and I see the thing there, but on the other hand, I feel like, I mean, then we're going to expect them when to go to the job market to be expert in AI, right? I mean, this is just like the conflicting sort of interest in here. Whereas I feel like they should be getting comfortable using some of the, because the world's going to change like crazy. So my
right.
next prediction, which is very unfortunate one, because I think it's going to happen where the money is flowing in the markets. We're going to see, I feel like next year we're going to see lots of layoffs in engineering mainly, because obviously, even if we say that this tools are not a replacement of engineers, but in some corner right now, these tools are being sold to companies as a replacement for engineers. So I think we're going to see drastic layoffs happening next year, which would is going to make this thing very uncomfortable. Um, because all the stats and leaderboards, they look at leaderboards, even though those are gamified, saying, "Oh, this what code can run for 4 hours and fix all the problems. Why do I need 10 engineers to do that?"
Yeah. I think I agree with you, because one of the predictions I wrote down, because I had to type it out yesterday, was that
Yeah,
also that new roles are going to be created. New roles are going to be created, and there is going to be huge questions around. Trying to say that big companies are going to ask a lot of questions around how do we get this AI thing into what we are doing, right? So people that understand how AI can be integrated into an already existing company, process, business, code base are going to make a lot of money next year.
In
People that
Yeah,
fact,
but
understand how.
the
what I
role
believe,
changes are difficult, though, right? Sorry, Harry,
yeah,
just to add one thing.
yeah,
Harry
please
says
finish.
something about product engineers, right? I mean, which I see that role evolving, right? We're going to see any engineer who can also think like a business problem and solve that is like taking a couple of roles together. And usually people who can perform multiple roles are variable in the organization, right? In corporate
Yeah,
world. But not many engineers are good at that, though. Engineers are, I know lots of engineers, and nothing wrong with that. They're really good at, if you give them specification, they will execute it and build a really
they
good
execute.
software.
Yeah,
I feel like that's not going to be enough, though, right? That's the problem.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry, go ahead,
yeah,
Harry.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that there is this period of lull that's going to inevitably happen. It's already there in a way
Yeah,
if you think about it. But what I also see as a, I don't know if it's a silver lining or if it's something else, but with coding agents, right, the volume of actual output that's happening and the speed at which is happening, that's also going to increase. So the quantum of software that's generated is also increasing.
true.
While the jobs that generate the software engineering will be gone, you need like context engineers or harness engineers, so to speak, all these fancy terms, who can help
Mhm.
control and contain the quality of what's being built and do that, right? I certainly see a need for it, but even I don't have an idea as to when this transition will happen, because number one, I think we have to catch them young, and schools have to teach people about how to use AI
Right.
effectively, I guess. Number two, for the industry to make a shift, I think the big ships are the ones which are going to have difficulty, changing their course. And number three, in terms of actually roles being rewritten, like I think what Precious was saying, like the general traditional role of what I do as a day-to-day job description is completely turned on its head. So for all these things to settle down, it's going to take time. But I there is a demand which I see for all the quantum leap and the the amount of software that's generated. Someone has to contain it, but how and where the supply for that will catch up, and eventually when the job market is going to settle down for it, that is, yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
is
mean,
anybody's guess right
and
now.
my biggest, there are a couple of things. I mean, now we're going negative. We should end with positive, but I want to say this because I worry about this a lot, because this is where we're heading into. First, what Harry said makes a lot of sense. Like, we should be hiring for, what should be hiring? What should, maybe we should add the audience in here. What are the three things we should be looking for next year when we hire engineers? Obviously, it cannot be whether the person knows JavaScript, because that's past. We passed that point. The second thing, I feel like lots of things happening in corporate America right now is that they're gonna think they're gonna look at their software engineering team, let's say, which have 100 people, 200 people. They'll say, we are not going to need 200 people. If you can have like 50 licenses of Cloud Code that can do work for 100 people, they will try to shrink it down. But they're always going to have human in the loop, right? This is for liability, security, compliance, whatever that is, that, oh, there should be some engineer who needs to review the PR before it gets merged. And it goes back to this thing that I read recently called reverse contour, that means we are just becoming a human being looking at this hundreds of lines of AI generated code, reviewing it. I mean, statistically, it's impossible to detect issues in large code bases like this. I mean, we have token limits here, right?
yeah,
And but they're gonna shift the blame, saying, Neil, you were part of the peer review. How this bug went in, it's your fault. I think that's the future I'm so really not excited about. I'm afraid of. Now we're putting this engineers we're gonna hire with AI generating agents and make this engineers responsible for the whole project, even though AI is generating 90% of the code. That's,
That is indeed a very big problem, because
yeah,
it's a absurd situation, right? Because ultimately the artifact, there are industries I work with where industry verticals demand that the code be explainable by the engineer, right? So the behavior cannot be non-deterministic. So technically speaking, you cannot have an LLM in the workflow or somewhere in the project where you cannot say this is inexplicable, right? Everything has to be logged, and this was the behavior that happened, and this is why the decision was
Mhm.
taken. So by right, the code has to be explainable, and the code is what the team is held accountable for.
Mhm.
But if the code is not written by them and the volume of code is extremely high,
Hi.
the review load is also high, and which is one of the reasons why I got into spec driven development, because it kind of reduces the, like, the, let's say 80% of the issues, right? But there is still that, even if there is a 0.01 chance that a kind of thing slips through innocuously and creates a big issue, who is that engineer who's going to get blamed, under whom the commitment?
I
So that's kind of a little absurd,
Yeah.
right?
So one way I don't have a solution for this, but I know this is exactly happening, and I feel all the engineers are going to get pushed to this, where all our job is to review this hundreds of lines of code generated by AI. That job doesn't sound exciting to me at all. Um, what then means is that this decision should not be top down. I think your engineering team should decide what tools to use for AI generation, because then practices like the open spec and stuff that Harry talked about makes sense. Because right now it's becoming very top down. Manager coming in, your productivity up needs to be 20% for this whole department. And we're rushing in all the steps without thinking, and we're turning human to like reverse contour essentially, right? Our brains are not working anymore. Maybe AI is doing all the thinking. We're just clicking buttons here. And that is not what software engineering should be. Precious, you have to end with some positive. I feel like I'm going way down negative in here.
So I quickly asked ChatGPT to give me some positive 2026 AI.
Good one.
So he gave me a bunch of things. I'm just going to read it
Okay.
out.
Okay.
So we'll end with some positives. All right. So he said AI will handle repetitive coding. I think he's already handling it in 2025. Natural language programming will make building software faster and more accessible. I think that is already happening. Legacy systems will be easier to modernize. This is interesting, right? Because we've been saying that legacy code base will be easier to handle since 2020 what? 2024. This is 2025 ending. We've not seen that yet. So I'm still looking forward to it. So hopefully happen in 2026. Multi-agent systems will help teams build smarter and more autonomous applications, right? And then AI powered CI/CD will reduce deployment risk. I think I already mentioned this when I was talking, right? And then something positive, Neil, I think you like this. So ChatGPT said AI will help teams catch security issues earlier, reducing vulnerability. So that's for you. So yeah,
I want to add one thing.
Those are
One
good
thing
ones.
that Harry said is probably a really exciting, is that this is still the best time to be a builder and software
yeah,
developer. I still think,
yeah,
because this reduced time of idea to actually something working is so getting smaller and smaller. Like, remember
yeah,
back in days where we used to start a project on weekend, we never finish. We had unfinished projects over and over again. But you don't have to. You can build something
yeah,
within a weekend and ship. I think that's really,
yeah.
really exciting.
That's really, really exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
All
So
right. I think
guys, I guess this day we draw the curtain. Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. This is like an hour, 18 minutes. This is the longest episode we've had on this podcast, right? So,
it was
Wow.
good. It
so
was a
guys,
great one.
yeah, this is a great one. I think we had about 20 people join us on Twitter. I
Mhm.
think I saw approximately 3 to 5 people join us on YouTube, and then about 2 people on LinkedIn. So, guys, thank you. If you join us live, thank you. If you didn't join us live, don't worry. The recording is also on YouTube. So if you're watching this as a recorded version, or maybe you're seeing a short clip, I want to say thank you for joining us on the podcast. And then, yeah, thank you, Nilanjan. Thank you, Harry. And then, yeah, enjoy the
Thanks,
rest of your
Harry.
day.